So in a coordinate plane, if we want to find the length of a horizontal or vertical line, we just count, right? So if we have a line that goes from -3 to +3, and the coordinates are -3, 1, we can just count the distance between the 2 points, right? It's going to be 6 units. So what if we want to find the midpoint of a horizontal line? Well, we can average the two x values together, right? They're different. The y values are the same. That's what makes a line horizontal, right? When it has two of the same y values, both of the y values are equal to 1. So therefore, we're going to average the two x values together in order to find the midpoint of a horizontal line. So if you have a horizontal line and you're trying to find the midpoint, you're going to use the following formula. Okay, this probably looks very foreign to you. Let me explain. So we've already explained that y has the same value in this horizontal line. The average of two of the same numbers, so 1 plus 1 divided by 2, is going to give me 1. That's going to give me the same number. So we don't need to concern ourselves with the y value right now. We just need to find the x value of the midpoint, because we know it's going to be some number, midpoint, comma, 1, because it needs to be on the same line, so it needs to have a y value of 1. So if you average, this is basically just taking the average of the two x coordinates, right? If you average those two together, we're going to get x midpoint equals x endpoint 1, which is going to be -3, plus x endpoint 2, which is going to be 3, all divided by 2. And you're going to get x midpoint equals 0, because -3 plus 3 is going to give you 0 divided by 2. Anything divided by anything, when you divide 0 by anything, it gives you 0. So the x value of the midpoint is going to be 0. And we already know that the y value is going to be 1 because it's on the same horizontal line as the other 2 points. So our x midpoint is going to be 0, 1. All right? So let's do the same thing, but with a vertical line. So let's say we have the following vertical line. In order for a line to be vertical, the x values have to be the same. So let's make a line that is 3 and -3, okay? So we'll say it's 1 is the x value, and then 3 is the y value. And down here, 1 is the x value because it's a vertical line, so they share an x value, -3. Okay, so if we wanted to find the distance between these 2 points, we would obviously just add them together, and we would get 6 units. But we don't want to find the distance. We want to find the midpoint. So just like we used the x midpoint formula, we're going to use the y midpoint formula, which is y endpoint plus y endpoint divided by 2. Okay, so we're going to average these 2 points together. We get y midpoint is equal to 3 minus 3, you get 0. 0 divided by 2 is going to be 0. So our y midpoint coordinate is going to be 0. So we know that our x midpoint coordinate is going to be 1, because if you average two of the same number together, you're going to get the same number. So we have 1 as our x value, as shown above, and 0 as our y value. So our y midpoint on this line is going to be 1, 0. And now you know how to find the midpoint of a vertical line and a horizontal line. So what do you do if a line is diagonal? Well, remember when we were using the distance formula? If you were trying to find the distance of a horizontal line, you could just count. If you were trying to find the distance of a vertical line, you could just count. But if you were trying to find the distance of a diagonal line, you had to use the distance formula. So because we're trying to find the distance of a diagonal line, we're going to have to use a different formula. It's the same formula, we're just combining the y midpoint formula with the x midpoint formula, so we can get an xy coordinate that's going to have two different values, okay? So, let's see. Since it, okay. The formula that I just explained to you is going to be this. So as you can see, we are going to, at the end of this, get an x, y coordinate that will be the midpoint of this line. Okay? So when I learned midpoint in high school, there was a song and it said, midpoint, midpoint, what you gonna do? Add them all together and divide by 2. So, I mean, obviously it's extremely cheesy, but that's how I learned it, and I still remember the midpoint to this day, so that must sort of speak to something. I don't know. Anyway, let's see this formula in action, okay? So, we have a question. Find the midpoint of JK for J, which is -1, and K, which is 6, 1. All right, so using this formula up here, we always rewrite the formula before we start plugging stuff in, right? We also always draw the figure. So let's graph this. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -2, -3, -4, -5. Okay, so J is -1, 2. Always label your points, right? And then K, we have 6 over, 1 up. Okay, and then I draw my line. So I'm trying to find the midpoint. So I'm trying to find this point on the line. All right, so I rewrite my formula. X Okay, so for my x midpoint, I'm going to have these two numbers added together and divided by 2. It's 1 divided by 2. For my y midpoint, I'm going to have these two numbers added together and divided by 2. And over here I'm going to get 5 over 2. Over here I'm going to get 3 over 2. I'm going to get x midpoint equals 2.5. I'm going to get y midpoint equals 1.5. So as you can see, I have an x value. And I have a y value. So I can just make that into a coordinate and I have my answer. And the answer will be 2.5, 1.5. So let's see that on the graph. Let's see, we go 2.5 over. I mean, I drew this graph by hand, so it's not entirely perfect, but we go about 2.5 over, right about here. We go 1.5 up, right about here. And we're pretty on point, considering this was hand drawn, but that's how you find the midpoint of a line.